I am located in Chicagoland area. My school district is approximately 10 miles west of the city of Chicago borders. We are a school district that is about 75% free and reduced lunch, 85% African American, and then 10% Latino, and then 5% other. We are school-wide Title I, and we are a community in which, we have multi-generational families that have attended our district and school. The one thing that my superintendent, Dr. Jackson, and I believed in when we came into the school district together 5 years ago is that, really working on the heart piece and making sure that, making those connections with students, families, and also staff, and what that means, and looking and putting the social emotional well-being and the heart first, because we know that's the way you're going to get the most dividends, right? It's all about, building that social capital so that when it's time to, make a withdrawal, that you can do that. And also people understand that it's authentic, genuine, and true. So, when this whole piece started with COVID-19, it surprised us like everyone else. We weren't prepared to do what we call now distance learning or remote learning, which I'll reference what I call it myself. I might differentiate a little bit, but the first thing that we did. So this is just for context. This is week 4 for us here in terms of remote distance learning, shelter in place, and not being able to attend physical school. And before our governor made a public announcement, it was probably a Friday he made the announcement. Thursday, we had prepared and kind of planned that this announcement's coming. And we met, the leadership team met in the superintendent's office. So it was myself as Director of Special Services, Director of Curriculum Instruction, and then also our building principals, building administration, and then also our union leadership, so our union co-presidents. And I want to be very clear about that, with including them, because what we've tried to do when we started was build strong relationships between admin and union, because at the end of the day, it's all about kids. And if we can't have that strong bond, and it can't be authentic, and we can't be able to have a true professional learning community in that sense, nothing's going to work. So we met and we talked about, kind of what's the plan, what's next, what are we going to do? And the first thing we thought about were, one, we provide free breakfast and lunch every day. Right. So what we didn't want to do, we didn't want that to be interrupted, because so many of our students rely on that meal, right? Rely on that consistency. The second part is we have a population of McKinney-Vento students, meaning that, those students are considered homeless, and a lot of them take cabs to and from our campus. And also knowing that they have inconsistencies oftentimes in their living situations. How can we make this the most consistent for them as possible? And then the third piece is we thought about, okay, not just our students, but what are we going to do for our staff, right? And because this is uncharted territory, even if you've worked remotely before, this is different. This is, I call it, I don't consider it just necessarily remote learning or working remotely. I consider it learning and working remotely during crisis, because it's different, right? So for those of us that have worked remotely or currently do and have been doing that, when you work remotely or you do distance learning, it's planned, right? You understand what's going on. You have a process. There are certain parameters. You're able to set up your own schedule, and you can still do your work and then separate the other piece. What tends to happen is now it's crisis mode, right? And you're trying to figure out what's the best route and how do we move together as an organization. So we wanted to keep all those things in mind, all 3 stakeholders. And, we were the first, I would say, school district in our area that was able to truly think about that, in which we were providing the sack lunches in breakfast multiple times a week. We kind of figured that out. The first 2 weeks we were doing it daily, right? And we also were in a situation that we, even though we were one-to-one, our students didn't take their devices home. So that was another layer we had to work on and figure out. So we got on with our legal team, drafted a document that would cover us in terms of liability, because we were covered at school but not at home, and we wanted to make sure that there weren't any barriers to learning for students. Also, Wi-Fi was a consideration and what we could do. So we actually were fortunate enough to be able to rent some Wi-Fi hotspots from a neighboring district before it was in high demand. So we were able to make sure that our students had Wi-Fi access, even if they didn't have it at home, they had the hotspot. So those are some of the things we put in place right away, and we organized it pretty well, pretty quickly. We made sure our students that were McKinney-Vento homeless, that their cabs still picked them up and brought them to school to pick up their devices if they needed them, and also to get their breakfast and lunch, daily. And then we also, as the restrictions kind of tightened up, we moved from having families and students walk into the building in a protected area to we started to do like a curbside drive up service where we would bring everything to them, just because we wanted to be mindful of everything. And the other part is, we don't know the underlying health conditions of our families. We know our students because obviously we have a record of that, but there are students that are undiagnosed. They don't have the healthcare always to be able to diagnose. So there can be underlying conditions such as asthma that are present, and we don't know about it, and especially families as well. The other layer I want to talk about is that we have many families in terms of grandparents that are raising their grandchildren. So that's something else we had to think about in terms of technology, making sure that, it was accessible for them. It wasn't too hard. And then also making sure that it was accessible and how we could work with them to truly partner. So 2 weeks ago was our spring break. And I will tell you, no one took off for spring break. We took the entire week to plan strategically about what was next when the students came back, because the first week or so, week and a half, were considered like act of God days. So they weren't counting towards attendance. But as soon as we knew we came back from school after spring break, we needed to have a plan in place. And we need to know what that looked like. And that means that every stakeholder, paras, teachers, administrators, we all had to be very clear on what that plan was going to look like, what the daily schedule was going to look like, and then how we could implement that. So we worked hard. We did not have a spring break. And then we jumped right into Monday where the students are back and had to roll that out. So, I would say that if we didn't have the relationships that we had internally, it wouldn't have been possible, because, the state of Illinois is very strong in terms of unions and collective bargaining, et cetera. And for teachers to go above and beyond their contractual day and contractual hours to do what's best for kids was extremely powerful, right? There was no additional pay. They weren't compensated, but to take time off of their own spring break with their own families to collaborate and make sure what's best for our kids was extremely powerful. So as we transitioned into that next piece, the next question was, well, we saw the energy level was high. We saw that, everyone was excited because it was new, it was interesting. We wanted to be champions for our students. But by the second week, we started to notice that, the teachers were feeling some burnout, right? Even if they didn't say it, we could see it on their faces, right? They didn't have the same energy level that they had before. And, for us, we wanted to make sure that we were providing support for them, that it was important, right? Because, that in our field in particular, the narrative is often that we are martyrs, right? And we care more about everyone else than we care about ourselves. And, that's a very slippery slope, right? Because by nature, educators are givers. We want to give more. We want to help everyone. We want to fix. But, if we don't take the time in terms of our own self-care and wellness, we're not going to be able to help anyone, right? So, that's something that we recognize as a leadership team. And, we said we have to do something. So, just so happened, like the week before, I was talking to one of my colleagues who does some international education work, Kavita Tana. She's with Inspire Citizens Group. And we were just talking about the same thing, what she had experienced, because she was in China working in Beijing when the COVID-19 started. So she was at the epicenter. So she had been on this path months before I even knew what this was going to look like. And then she unfortunately had to move back to the UK where she's from because she could no longer stay in China. And she had a lot of time on her hands, but she was thinking about all of her students that she had in China, all of her friends, her colleagues that were going through this. And then the fact that, her world was turned upside down because she could no longer have this type of interaction and contact with people that she always had. And, she was upset. She was frustrated about it. And I posed the question to her, okay, so what do you want to do about it? Okay, what can we do about it? And she said, I don't know. I said, well, how about this? What if we put our collective efforts together and think about a way we can give back to educators and teachers? Because we recognize that right now, right, everyone has these, we've always had multiple roles and responsibilities, but now they're simultaneous. So that put your hat on for your day job, right? And then take it off when your children are asking for your support and help. And then put your other hat on, if your spouse or significant other needs your help. And then also as educators, right, we have our students that we're providing services for, and we can't just stop, right? So, it was critical to figure out a way, how can we give back? Because we know it's draining, right? Even a meeting such as this, right? At first, when you first start, you don't think about it. It's exciting, it's new, it's interesting. But as you get into it, you begin to realize as you reflect that these meetings take this more energy, effort, and focus and concentration than face-to-face physical meetings, because you don't have that personal interconnection or energy, right, that's going on. Plus, oftentimes you're sitting in the same space, in the same room, looking at this computer, and it's screen time. Screen time for adults, just like screen time for children, can be very, very unhealthy if it's not managed properly. And before you know it, you start realizing you've been on, quote unquote, for your work for 10 to 12 hours. And most of the time sitting in front of a computer, right? And so, the thing was that how can we best help their students? And I see my colleague Kavita has just joined the conversation. So, I know she'll definitely chime in. So we thought about what can we do, and she had these great ideas about providing this support for staff and what would that look like in terms of an emotional component and social emotional well-being, because she had lived through it. She was living through it. She was ahead of me, so she could give me tips in terms of what to expect and tell me, hey, Evan, this is going to be a roller coaster, right? It's going to ebb and flow, and you're going to have to be able to weather that storm. And this is what you can expect, and this is what not to do. And I said, you know what? We should really think about this, and how can we help teachers? And I have my mantra which is my 3 Bs: balance, boundaries, and breaks, that I implement, and I think it's just critical for everyone to do that. And then my friend Kavita is all about reconnecting and helping people reconnect with each other, reconnect with the earth, reconnect with what we're doing, our life's purpose. And then we thought about, and she said, would this be a great idea? Why don't we put them together and then create a program and help teachers? And I said, okay, let's do it. And literally within probably a few hours, we had designed this program that we wanted to do. And then I said, what if we can pilot it in my school district? I'll speak with my superintendent, my director of curriculum instruction, and see. And I want to say 2 days later, we had a Zoom conference with the 4 of us. Kavita was on the line, myself, my superintendent, Dr. Janice Jackson, and my director of curriculum instruction, Dr. Emily Erickson-Betts. We're on together because we were still passing out devices. And Kavita got on, and I was telling them about the idea, and they loved it. And that was a Saturday. And my superintendent, Dr. Jackson, said, okay, so when can we start? And Kavita and I said Wednesday, the following Wednesday. And the following Wednesday, we started the program. And the title of the program is The Alphabetic Survival Guide to COVID-19, how to provide social, emotional well-being for educators. And so what we do is we go through the alphabet, and each time we present, we do it 3 times a week, and it's provided between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 8:55 a.m. because the instructional day, so to speak, starts officially at 9 o'clock for our teachers. So we wanted to give them an extra boost before they have to go into the day, give them some energy. And, you know, we reached out to a lot of our colleagues and friends that were in education that are in different areas in terms of wellness and collaborative learning and building strong teams. And, you know, we reached out to them. We told them about the idea, and they were all on board. We didn't have to ask twice. Before we could even finish telling about it, they did it. And so it was great. So Kavita and I pitched it. We started on a Wednesday with the letter A, and we are going through the alphabet. And every day, every time we present the alphabet, there's a letter, obviously, and then there are 3 words that go with that letter to help with and discuss, inspire, and to provide hope and to encouragement and tips for educators to get through this moment in time.
Hey, Evan, why don't we take a break right now and see if anybody has a question for you?
Sure.
Okay. All right. And then maybe you can talk a little bit about what you're doing.
No problem.
You've kind of given us a 15-minute overview here now. And so let's stop.
Sure.
You've given a lot of great information. Let's see if there's some questions, because it's conversational. So who's got a question for Evan? Anybody?
You can type in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you're welcome to do that.
Nobody's got a question.
No questions.
Gee.
I'll pose one, Evan.
Okay.
This is Teresa Rouse and Joliet. How you doing?
Hey, hi, Teresa. How are you?
I'm good. So would you be willing to share your what you've put together so far with your alphabet?
Sure. And you know what? It's interesting that you say that, because Kavita and I were just talking about this last night. And Kavita, I know you're on, so I'm going to let you speak to that, because you have definitely been able to help organize and put this in process for us in terms of the framework.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I am on. I was just doing a little bit of well-being care for myself, and I was working out as I listened to the conversation, so just let me catch my breath. But yes, Evan and I were discussing the fact that he really loves the idea of the Alphabetic Survival Guide, and he felt that other school districts may be interested in pursuing the project also. And so you know, that project is that sort of building the plane as we're flying, much as we're all having to do during this time. And so what I would say is that, you know, definitely reach out to us by email if you would like to do something like this in your school or your school district, and we can discuss how we could share out, you know, what we've done so far and what that would look like in a practical sense for you, because as it's a conversation that has taken me by surprise somewhat, when really, as he explained, it sort of started from me, you know, feeling that sort of heart tug to support educators in some way during this time, and you know, for it to actually turn into something that is working for his team and that, you know, other people might be interested in is a revelation to me. And so I'm definitely happy to engage in conversation with how we could make that work for your school or your district.
Well, that'd be great, because rather than reinventing the wheel, it's nice to have a model to go by. So thank you.
And Evan, would you say a little bit about?
No, definitely. So I can put.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
I was just going to say that I'll put my email address into the chat for you.
All right, thank you so much. And Evan, would you say a little bit about how you used your conversation you had with me earlier on about how you used emotional poverty before this thing ever started, and how you thought that built empathy for your staff as well?
Definitely so. So emotional poverty training and book study that we're doing was extremely helpful. So, you know, because I'm able to provide that training to my staff, you know, we wanted at the beginning of the year, we wanted to figure out a unique way that we could provide it. And so what we did is we started a book study in which every month at our staff meetings, we would go through the book, go through the questions, and then also during our school improvement days throughout the year. So there were a total of 8 of them. I would actually go through the emotional training with our entire staff so that they could get the training as well and the book study. And it was extremely powerful. And I can couple sessions, you know, there was some resistance, right? It was because, you know, you're talking about topics that, you know, could be triggers for people, but also the fact that you're talking about, you know, situations where we as educators have to reflect and think about our own like implicit bias and think about the ways that we respond to emotions from students. And I can tell you that we started in August, by end of September, it was a complete turnaround. And the stories that were shared by teachers, their willingness to open up, and then their reflection of understanding the empathy of, you know, it's not personal, right? You know, students and children and even adults have a lot going on, and we all have our own history, right? And it just depends on if we had the skills and tools, to do that. You know, some of us do, which is great. You know, we've been fortunate enough to have the resources. Others of us don't have that and don't have those resources until we're older. So therefore, we're still trying to deal and work through some things. If it hadn't been for that work in terms of emotional poverty and what we did, obviously we had no idea this would be our state right now. We would never been able to understand the needs of our families truly, right? And to look at what that means and why. Because now the why is coming in place and you're seeing some of the manifestations of that. But I definitely would say that our staff had grown so much just in their ability to empathize, their ability to look at the perspective of others and not judge, but just understand it's the way that it is, and also how they respond to things. And right now it's been golden because you don't have the amount of blanket statements or just the misunderstandings, right? Truly, we have our educators, our teachers are really seeking to understand and asking the why, you know, and not taking things for so much face value. And now, you know, even more so, you're thinking about the fact that this is crisis. So you're going to see people at their worst and at their best at any given time. So what does that mean for our students, right? So I think that understanding that and understanding how emotions play into who we are, what we do, understanding how, you know, when things are not regulated, right? And how those can be triggers for other things to happen, when the brain is not regulated and why. It just provides so much more insight, and not the fact that they're experts or professionals in that field. However, it just opens their mind so much and their perspective where they're willing to think about some of the responses they may give or say, think about the parents and students that they're working with, even understanding their own background to now put themselves in the perspective to understand maybe why they are the way that they are. And it's been invaluable during this time.
Thank you. And one of the things is that you can go on our website, AHA Process, for the book Emotional Poverty. But one of the things that Evan and I had a conversation about this week, and I wrote a paper for it. And I think, Ruth, is it on the website yet? The paper about when you're online and what you see? Not yet? Okay. Well, we're going to put it on the website. And I wrote it specifically for Evan's group and for Inspire to use, but we'll have it on our website. But it's what teachers see and educators see when they're online and they see the homes and they see the issues and kinds of guidelines. And what I did is I wrote a series of questions that they can ask and some things to look for instead of the furniture and how clean it is or how messed up it is or that kind of thing. But really, are you looking at the function the child is in and how's that working for them? So we're going to be doing that as well. So it'll be on our website. Ruth, when will that be on the website?
We can get it out there today and then look for it also on Ruby's Facebook page.
Okay. All right. Okay. But I made a series of questions there. And Evan, why don't you say a little bit about kinds of things that you were concerned about?
Definitely. So, even though we had built this, sure. So, even though we had this foundation, it was great. But, the reality is this is the first time for many of us, right? We have a window to the lives of our students, right? We're in their homes now. So even though we had them every day in school and class, we'd see them. This is the first time we really have a chance to see what their life is like. And so now if you think about truly connecting with your students, right? And connecting with them in terms of what's happening outside the classroom, it's real. And for a lot of teachers, it may not be a problem, but for some, it's the shock of, oh my gosh, I had no idea that their life experiences are different than mine, right? Oh, I had no idea that maybe they don't have their own bedroom or a separate bedroom or a spare room with a desk that they can then do their homework at, right? That's a luxury. But also the fact that, there was a thought that just because their living conditions look different than the living conditions of our teachers, it doesn't mean that they're in trouble or it's dangerous or they're living in poverty necessarily. It just means it's different. For many of us, myself included, I grew up in apartments, so therefore, I didn't have the luxury of having a kitchen table, and it was fine and it didn't matter, but if you haven't experienced that, just truly going back to some of that bias that you have, and you think that you're doing the best, but just when you truly have a chance to step in the world of others, it really tests where you are. So when I reached out to Ruby, I talked about this and she was like, I have some great ideas, because the idea is, right, as educators, remember, we're still, that light is for a lot of us, but what does it really mean, right? Think about how can we help my staff to, ask the right questions, look for the right things, so that we can get the information that we need without being intrusive and crossing boundaries, but just knowing that it's coming from a good place. So Ruby told me that she was great, that she was able to get some information for me and get some questions that would be helpful and beneficial as we talked about, the family structure.
We lose you?
I'm still here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
A little bit.
How about hello? Hello?
Okay, Evan, I can hear you now.
Yes?
I would like to know who else on the phone has
Hello?
this plan for their district similar.
Yes, okay. So, well, since we're losing Evan here, let's switch to other kind of comments. Teresa, I know you're superintendent of a school. What are you doing right now?
Well, that's the fun part is as we all make this up as we go, I'm doing a lot of mass emailing to my staff. I've got 1,800 staff members, and so it's kind of hard to get them all on a Zoom meeting. I'm meeting with principals weekly to try to encourage them as they then meet with their teachers, and from there down further, meet with my cabinet weekly via Zoom. We're in a similar situation, well, actually higher level of poverty than what Evan was sharing, and so I have a lot of concerns about our families, and so I've been tapping into every webinar, every Zoom meeting, every anything to get ideas to be able to share with my principals who can share with their teachers as far as how to make certain that we're really reaching out to our families. On an average week when we're in session, we end up having anywhere from 6 to 10 calls to Department of Children and Family Services over suspected child abuse. Since we've been out on this closure, we've had one. I'm very concerned about what's happening in the homes with my students. The one came because the student felt comfortable enough to call her teacher. And they had a conversation, and the teacher then made the report to get help. But so as far as my biggest concern is the students, but yet then that other concern about the adults. That's my emails that I send out to the adult population are really focused on this notion of how are you taking care of yourself? What are you doing to make certain that your family is okay and know that we're here and you can reach out. It's been interesting in my signature block for my email, my work cell phone number is there. And typically, I mean, when we're in the office, if a staff member needs to get a hold of me, they'll email me or they'll call the office and ask for an appointment. It's been interesting the number of people who have called my cell phone and just reaching out just to say hi. Or I've got a question, or I'm really concerned about, at first when everything closed down, the biggest concern was over pay. Are we going to still get paid? And, fortunately, we are still able to, make payroll, and make certain that everybody remains whole in that regard. Having quality activity for them to do till they feel productive is a big challenge, because part of making certain we're taking care of ourselves is that we feel productive in what we do. Running a district of this size from my kitchen table is a little mind-boggling, but we're making it work because I've got a great team around me. But then it's like, how do you support them? How do I support my school board? It's being all things to all people, trying to meet those needs. Then I have to stop and wonder, what am I doing for myself? It all goes full circle. And I don't have any big answers. I don't have any big plans to share other than just we're making it day by day and, clinging on to every possible interaction or networking opportunity I can get with others who are dealing with these same pieces. And then trying to push those pieces out to my staff so that they have, something to hang on to so that they don't feel alone.
And could I ask you, Teresa, what's the conversation right now about moving ahead?
Well, that's right now we're waiting to hear from our governor. We're closed through April 30th. I don't anticipate us coming back for the rest of the school year because there's just no way. We still haven't reached any kind of peak in Illinois to be able to know that we can, safely return. And then when we return, what's it going to look like? As I start hearing some of these other states talking about their plans to return and even having staggered attendance at schools, I have to wonder what is that going to look like for my district if we can't have everybody back at school. If you can't have more than 50 people together, let's say, how do you have passing period at a junior high that has 1,200 students? You can't. So I'm baffled at the moment for what to even consider. We're working on I'm already making the plan to be through the end of the school year not having school. We have a somewhat of a plan for summer school learning, some learning backpacks to send home with students so they have learning activities to do over the summer. We really are struggling with special education and being able to meet the needs of our special education students. Our social workers are calling the students that they have connections with constantly, just to make certain that we're all trying to stay in the same place. But when we think about starting the school year next year, it's going to look very different. But I don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet, and there's no magic bullet, there's no silver bullet, there's no magic 8-ball that's going to tell me how to make that happen. But typically the first day we're all back, all 1,800 employers are in one room together. That's probably not going to happen. So, how do we even begin the school year in a way that that protects the health, but also supports the mental health and emotional health of our staff and students? Those are big questions, Ruby. I don't have the answers. I'm seeking them and tapping into everything I can possibly tap into to get ideas.
You're in Joliet, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to send you some stuff. Okay.
Okay, appreciate it.
Trina, you had a comment.
No, I didn't have a comment. I just got in. Thank you. Listening.
Okay, where are you?
I'm in Memphis. I work for Habitat for Humanity, and just got certified in Bridges right before it started. I mean, if it had been a week later, it probably would have been canceled. Yeah. So I'm just here to kind of glean whatever I can about what people are doing.
Right. Well, I will make and we're always done with this at 12:15. So I'll make a couple comments and observations. One is that to all of us, with Erica's, with TANF, no, you're with Child Protective Services, right, Erica? Yeah, Child Protective Services. I want to say a couple things that we're thinking about as we hear from all over the country. Number one, we're hearing that schools are having trouble keeping track of their people, okay? Like I talked with a woman Native American Indian tribe. She has 150 high school students. She's only been able to get in contact with 6 of them. So it's high poverty, one of the areas. So how do we find, like Habitat for Humanity, like your Child Protective Services, how do we go about finding all the children when this is over? That's going to be an issue, okay? Number 2 is how we support the adults. One of my consultants, Evan, does consulting for me. Another one of my consultants who's at a community college, they had 2 suicides in 1 week. So the question becomes, how do you help the adults? And I think that domestic violence is up across the world by 35%. So there's just going to be all kinds of issues that we end up dealing with. And one of the things I'd love to hear comments from people, but I think particularly for those of us that are in the school business, and those of you that work on community issues, it's my gut sense we're going to have to address the emotional issues before we can address the academic issues. I'd love to hear from other people about that. I don't think we're going to, even among the adults, I don't think we're going to be able to move very far at all till we address the emotional issues, because people have died. They've lost people they've loved. There's going to be so much emotional fallout, and I don't hear anybody talking about that. Erica, do you have a comment about that?
We really haven't had that experience up here yet. It's more centered down towards New York City. We have, I think, about 50 cases and only 1 person's been hospitalized. I think what's really drawing attention is that it's more than just this COVID-19, because everybody's experiencing losses. We just had One of our teachers lost her husband due to pneumonia. There's flu deaths going on. So I think that's it's the bigger outreach of trying to figure out how we're going to support everybody that's losing individuals due to some sort of issue, not just COVID-19, because those individuals are kind of getting pushed by the wayside because of this pandemic. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're going to we'll figure something out, but there has to be some sort of outreach to everybody.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's one of the reasons I like the Bridges model, because it really pushes very hard. We have the framework on the school side, emotional poverty on the school side, but the Bridges model is a collective model where people start pulling their resources and start working together toward common goal. And I really think for communities to survive, they're going to have to do that. I think it's an issue. If you're interested in the model, it's on our website. It's called Bridges Out of Poverty, and we look at resources. And the other thing I would make an observation that I believe we're going to have to define poverty differently too. I don't think it can be about money anymore, just about money. I think it's one of the most interesting pieces of research that came out of the Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans is that they researched people from low-income neighborhoods who made it out and survived Hurricane Katrina and people who didn't. And the biggest difference was the ones who survived it had a lot more social capital than the ones who didn't. And I think we'll start looking at resources in a much broader frame, like we do in Bridges. And I think the social capital is going to be huge. Who helps you out and who are your support systems? And then the other comment I'll make is I am hoping beyond hope for those people in the school business that we lose our institutional rigidity. I hope we lose that. The idea that most high school kids in most states, they have 24 credits, and 18 of those 24 are pretty much prescribed for them, and they have to do those things. And I'd like to see us a little more flexible about the development of talent. And I said the other day, I cried. I read on New York Times, this child psychologist was saying, here's what you should do with your children at home. You should play with them. You should have games with them. You should do physical activities with them. You should sing with them. And I thought, yes, and that's everything we've taken away from kindergarten. And the bottom line is I know teachers who would kill to do that. So I'm hoping that we get some of that institutional flexibility back. I think it's going to be critical for the emotional well-being. So I don't know if there are other comments people would like to make or comments.
I think that the economic impact, even though that is, like you said, may not be the primary, but that is what people are going to focus on if they've lost their jobs. So at Habitat, we have our homeowners and they have lost their jobs, then their mortgage, they pay their mortgage or their utilities bills and all of those things. But I was talking with my husband this morning and we were talking about, we've already got our $24,000 in our account. And we were talking about how we would spend that money. And I thought so much about Bridges, such a middle class thought. But everybody's not going to think like that. And I was saying everybody's not going to spend their money like that. Where they should, but it's going to be, everybody's going to make the perfect decision from a middle class point of view with those dollars that they get.
Right.
Have already gotten.
Yeah. And the other thing that's happening is just, I'm sure this is not a secret to everybody. I saw what Mr. Hedgewood said is that, yes, when you lose your job, you lose your identity. There is a wonderful African-American sociologist out of Harvard. His last name is Wilson. And he said this, if you want to break a culture, all you have to do is take work away from men because it changes identity. And what happens is we're going to see a lot of that happening, is that you don't have role identity anymore. And then that's connected with purpose. So I think it's going to be huge.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good ideas out there in Bridges. And so I'll send you some things, Teresa. And I wanted Evan to talk a little bit about his project he's working on right now, and about the how he felt emotional poverty work made a difference for him. And we have that course online digitally for people to take, so that they can take it in their time if they wish. But I want to thank everybody for being on, and we'll do this again next Wednesday. We'll try and get some themes here. One theme I'm very interested in is, where do we go from here? Because I'd like to have conversations starting about how we might start moving forward. Anyway, so thank you so much, and
Thank
look
you.
forward to seeing you next time.